Under the shadow of his might. Under the shadow of his might. We've been away for this week at Sukkot. Well, Sukkot is this week, but we've been away with some family friends, some fit family friends in the mountains, enjoying Sukkot and fellowshipping with one another. Sukkot's one of the Old Testament feasts. It's where you're to eat outside, eat your meals outside in your little sukkahs, and just enjoy the presence of God more intently, be more intentional in his purpose and your time with him. Sukkot is the time that the Ten Commandments were given to Moses. Christ was actually born during the season of Sukkot, and Pentecost happened during Sukkot. So my expectation this year at Sukkot was, I was camping, so it's going to be lower to the ground. And my expectation was just to have a more like awakening, like a as if he was going to give me a gift of advancement. Is my thought. So I thought it would happen at the campground, being low to the ground, but I was completely distracted with the fact that I was low to the ground and it was cold. But I do want to share. I had the opportunity to speak while I was there, and that was it's always a treasure to me. It's always a treasure to me when the Lord sets up a time for me to speak to others about him and his presence and his purpose and his function, and just to draw others into a more intimate walk with him. It's always like a treasure to me. I treasure those moments. I get really, right before it happens, I get really nervous, like, God, I can't do this. I'm going to vomit. And then it's like, okay, just do it. So, thank you, Fit Fam, for the invite to speak. While we were there, I was watching Duncan look for this little toy, and he was very intentional. And he looked and he looked, and he couldn't find it. And he'd stop people along the way asking about this toy. And I said, oh, Father God, look at the determination in this kid. You're showing me his determination. So I'm asking you, God, I'm asking you that he is that determined and that diligent in finding your lost, that it will be a passion placed deep in his core that will remain his whole life, that his intentional focus would be on your lost. Use him like a valiant warrior to find your lost, to go through trudges, to be determined to find your lost. Oh, what a powerful moment that was for me to be able to speak into this kid the purposes of God, to see his gifts, and to speak God's purpose. And Haven, ever since Brittany had her in her tummy, I just knew this kid was going to be a talker. I said, you should name her Gabby. And Brittany's like, no. Her name is Haven. Haven is a refuge. Haven is a safe place. And the child loves to sing. And I've just known that too. She will be a safe, let me rephrase. Others will find a safe haven in her relationship with God. It will be so intimate and so sweet and so moving, and it will be put to lyrics and songs or dance. She will be a worship leader, and she'll bring others into the kingdom. They'll find a haven in her silhouette or her voice. On our last day there, we go to the top of the mountain, and we're positioned between the sun and the moon, and they look and they see their shadow, and they're just raving about how large their shadows are. And I explained to them that that shadow that they see represents their spiritual identity, and it will always be bigger than their natural one. That there's always more to them than they will ever know. They thought that was cool. And every time Haven stood there, she had her hands held up in praise, right? Like, I don't know if she realized the stance, but Gran knew clearly what the stance was. Duncan typically had some kind of stick, like he's fighting. We go down the mountain, and the Lord has me stop again because we're further away from the sun, and there's some shadows from the trees, and I ask them to look for their shadows again. And they're not as big, and they're not as valiant. So I explained to them that the further we get away from the sun, the smaller our shadows become. That the sun, and for us to have a big shadow, is absolutely necessary the closer we are to the sun. So let's get back up there and look at our shadows again. That was just, for me, just I wanted to stand there and play in my shadow. I wanted to see it be huge. It was a testimony. And I love how the Lord wants us to teach our children along the way. Because when we are intentional in that, He will drop little lessons on us all the time. These children are our inheritance. And we need to teach them and tell them who God is and who they are in Him.